want to dive in. UConn, as I said, is a 6.5-point favorite as of Sunday evening. And I want to dive into this game from a lot of different angles. But where I really want to start is this. I want to say a quick thank you. Thank you to the college basketball gods, okay? Because the bottom line is, listen, I love college hoops. You all love college hoops. And I do think nationally, people love it more than people would think. I mean, that UConn San Diego State game last year was higher rated than any NBA game we had all year, except maybe one in the NBA Finals. I can't even remember at this point. But the point I'm trying to make, everybody loves the tournament. Everybody's going to watch the championship game. But it does feel a little bit different this year, doesn't it? Because think about it. For most of this season, now you want to go back to the first week or two. I know we all liked Arizona early. We all liked Kansas early. But at the end of the day, really from about January 1 on, there were only 3 teams that you could really argue were the best team in college basketball. It was either UConn, it was Purdue, and I think Houston was absolutely in that conversation as well. I don't want to make any revisionist history, but you look at Houston, and even by the end of the year, you started to say, well, they kind of got a lot of injuries. Juwan Roberts is limping around in the Big 12 tournament. Couple season-ending injuries, Terrence Arsenault among them, an NBA-type prospect. And so when Jamal Shead went down, listen, I think if Jamal Shead doesn't go down, Houston probably wins that game against Duke and probably is in the Final Four. But he did go down. Injuries were their problem all year. And so in the end, we basically get the best possible game we could because we got 2 teams that everybody agreed were elite all year. And I actually think even within the Houston part of that conversation, I think it was kind of the UConn looks the best on paper, but Purdue probably has the best resume. Remember, we can criticize Purdue for whatever we want, or I can. I know a lot of people, Purdue fans, will be in the mentions here. But Purdue's resume was unbelievable this year. Neutral court win over Tennessee. Neutral court win over Kansas, or over Marquette, in the Maui Invitational. Neutral court win over Gonzaga. Obviously, they played Gonzaga and Tennessee in the NCAA tournament. But neutral court win over Arizona, over Bama. They won at Illinois to clinch a Big Ten regular season title. So they had an incredible resume. UConn was kind of viewed as the best team. And now we get to see it. And now we get to see a game that I think everyone can easily wrap their arms around, right? The argument that there aren't good storylines, or there aren't stars, or there aren't brands, or there aren't this, or there aren't that, it doesn't apply here. End of story. UConn, unquestionably, one of the biggest brands in college basketball. UConn going for a second straight national title. Hasn't been done in close to 2 decades. And I'd mention again, this isn't Florida in 2007 because Florida in 2007 returned all 5 starters. So you have that. You have America starting to appreciate what Dan Hurley may mean to the future of college basketball as we're looking for a name and a face to associate with this sport. The fact that I think all of these UConn players, Donovan Clingan has helped his draft stock. So now you got the NBA fans interested. Steph Castle has helped his draft stock. So you got the NBA fans interested. And so I bring it up very simply to say, UConn, defending champ, one of the 2 or 3 rising coaches in the sport. And then you got Zach Edey and Purdue. And you got Purdue. They hadn't been to a Final Four since 1980. They got that monkey off their back. They haven't been to a title game since 1969. They have not won a national title in the modern era. So it is freaking crazy, all of the great storylines. And like I said, for college basketball, this is just so great because, again, ultimately it is something that everyone can wrap their arms around and everybody can get really, really, really excited about, okay? So I bring that up because that's the good part. Now let's get to some of the matchups because I think there's one that everybody's talking about and there's one that maybe people aren't quite talking about as much. The first one, the one that everybody cares about, everybody's talking about, it's obviously the battle in the paint, right? It is the battle in the paint involving Donovan Clingan and Zach Edey. And we've talked a lot about Zach Edey, and I know every Purdue fan in America thinks Torres hates Zach Edey. That is not the case at all, okay? And as I've said, he was my National Player of the Year. Duh. He was the only guy, outside of maybe Dalton Connect there for a little while that was part of that conversation. When you can average 25 points, 13 boards, 2.5 blocks, 50% shooting from the three-point line at 7'4", you're special. And what I've said about Zach Edey is this: listen, he's a special player. I can disagree on some of the other stuff that's out of his control, specifically how he is refereed, but it doesn't change the fact that he's special, that he's quick, he's mobile, he's athletic, he's got a jump hook with both hands, he's impossible to guard with one player. But what makes this game interesting is that Donovan Clingan is maybe the only player in America that can match up with him. Clingan, to me, even outside of the Zach Edey stuff, is the breakout star of the early part of this NCAA tournament, okay? The early part of the NCAA tournament, forgive me, okay? And when I say breakout star, Purdue fans, don't get mad. Everybody knew about Zach Edey, and certainly everybody knew about Donovan Clingan. But remember, Donovan Clingan was banged up earlier in the season, didn't play, frankly, got hurt in the preseason. So even when he started the season, he was kind of behind the eight ball. Then he gets re-injured in December. And Dan Hurley even said, he goes, Donovan Clingan is playing his best basketball at the best possible moment in time. And man, oh man, do I give him so much credit. And he's done it on a national stage. He's done it in the biggest moments. Listen, how about this? Hassan Diarra, our guy who joins us on this show every week, he said for weeks, he said, Donovan is the most impactful player in college basketball. And I know Zach Edey's in college basketball, so maybe Zach Edey is co-number one with Donovan Clingan. But you watch Donovan Clingan over these last couple games, are you kidding me? Just think about the games that Donovan Clingan has had the last week or so, okay? Go back to what was it? The Illinois game. It was bananas. 22, 10, and 5. Controlled the paint, 30-0 run. UConn cruises to victory over Illinois. Bama, 18, 5, 4 blocks. And I'll tell you, I was in that arena. It felt like he had about 26, 14, and 7, okay? 18, 5, and 4 has never felt bigger than the impact that Donovan Clingan had in that game. And so when I look at this matchup, I look at the fact that you can sort of maybe get away with Clingan playing him one-on-one. Now, to me, a couple things. Never going to defend Zach Edey solely, but I do think Clingan staying out of foul trouble is not kind of important. It is very important. And I think, look, UConn doesn't have a ton of front court depth. Obviously, if Clingan gets in foul trouble, that could be tough for UConn, especially early in the game. Thought it was interesting. Dan Hurley on Saturday against Alabama, Clingan picked up an early foul. Hurley pulled him right away. Now, I know they weren't playing a Bama team that had the size like Purdue does with Zach Edey, but I don't think this is the thing where Donovan Clingan is going to pick up 2 fouls in the first 4 minutes and he's on the bench for the rest of the first half. I think if he gets a foul, Hurley will bring in Samson Johnson. He'll rotate some guys. He's not going to lose Clingan for the game. The bigger thing to me, though, and we talked about this a little bit on the Saturday reaction show, as big as the Donovan Clingan versus Zach Edey story is, what I don't think nearly enough people are talking about is the matchup in the backcourt between Purdue and UConn, okay? Because Edey, I would argue this. I don't think Donovan Clingan is going to neutralize him. I think Zach Edey is going to get his. But I'll even take it a step further. I think Zach Edey can get his. But what I worry about is there a second guy for Purdue? And I'll be honest, I just think after watching those 4 teams on Saturday night in Phoenix, I think the Purdue guards are really going to struggle with UConn, okay? And this isn't a hot take. It's not Torres hating Purdue. But let's just look at some simple facts. Let's just use basic facts, okay? Purdue's backcourt, Fletcher Lawyer, 6'4", 180. Braden Smith, 6 foot, 175. Lance Jones, 6'1", 200 pounds, okay? UConn, now let's just compare. This is not judgment free. This is not Torres as the hot take guy. This is not Torres that hates Purdue, not Torres that went to UConn. UConn, Tristan Newton, 6'5", 195, going to play in the NBA, I believe. Cam Spencer, 6'4", 205. Steph Castle, 6'6", 215. And so you just look at the matchup on the perimeter. This is, like remember J.J. Redick, when he called me an F-head, he said it's a simple math equation, F-head? Well, it's a simple math equation for UConn. They're simply bigger and stronger and more athletic at all 3 guard spots. Really quickly, you look at Lance Jones. I think he's been a great addition for Purdue. But I think Steph Castle starts on him early, and Steph Castle's been great in this tournament, not just offensively, but I don't think he gets nearly enough credit for his defense in this tournament. Remember, he was the guy that primarily was covering Terrence Shannon Jr. in that Elite Eight game in which we were told that Terrence Shannon Jr., who was an elite player during the season, was unstoppable. Terrence Shannon Jr. finished that game with 8 points on 16% shooting from three. Go back to, oh, by the way, the Northwestern game early in the tournament. Oh, I saw some people, boo, he might be the best player on the floor. All Big Ten guy from Northwestern. Boo, he finished the game with 9 points, 13% shooting from three. Boo, 9 points, 13% shooting from three, as I just said. And so I think you put Steph Castle on Lance Jones, and I think the other two Purdue guards struggle. Listen, I know that it has been a criticism that has fueled Purdue all year. Everyone has said all year long the Purdue guards are not good enough. I get that. What I will also say, I'm not saying they're not good enough to win a lot of games. I'm not saying they're not good enough to win 30-plus games. They won 34 games as I record here on late Sunday night. But at the same time, they obviously have not seen the size and the athleticism and the speed of that UConn backcourt. Listen, I keep saying it. I know I said it on Saturday's show. But being in that arena, two things stood out. Watching the UConn-Alabama game, I had a direct sight line to see, and I'm not X's and O's guy, but all of the things that Alabama was trying to do to get open, and all of the things that, and all of the chasing around and speed and athleticism that UConn was able to counter it with. Now, Alabama was 8 for 11 from three in the first half, but again, the size, the physicality, the toughness, it wore down Alabama just like it wore down basically everybody that UConn has played this year. Alabama obviously finished that game. They started 8 for 11 from beyond the three-point arc. We know how it finished, 11 to 23, so not bad. But 3 of your final 12, that's not going to get it done. And so you counter that with what we saw from Purdue. Purdue's guards were fine against NC State. But at the same time, let's also call a spade a spade. NC State, a super athletic team. Really, DJ Horne did whatever he wanted. DJ Horne from NC State finished with 20 points, 2 3-pointers made, 6 rebounds, and an assist. So he got to his spots. He was able to do what he wanted. Now imagine that UConn has 3 DJ Horns that are all skilled, that can all get buckets, that are all finished. Maybe Cam Spencer's not a DJ Horn. So 2. They have 2 DJ Horns, but instead of being 6'1", they're 6'5" or 6'6". Then you have Cam Spencer shooting threes. Then you have Hassan Diarra off the bench, who is a monster defensive player. I just don't know how Purdue gets buckets. And so listen, I got to get to the Calipari stuff, and so forgive me on this. But when I look at this game, I think that's what it comes down to. As a matter of fact, I'll even take it a step further. I would actually argue that in my opinion, I would argue that I believe a couple things. I believe that you can let Zach Edey get his. Like this has been my philosophy the entire tournament. I can go back to the Utah State game in round 2 because Utah State had a 6'8" center named Great Osabor. And I said, what you can't do is try to think that a 6'8" guy is going to defend Zach Edey. Let Zach Edey get his 30 and 20. Let him get his 40 and 25, but stop everybody else on the court. And nobody has really tried to do that. And I know, Torres, you don't know everybody. You're smarter than the coaches. No, but what I'm just saying is if you cut off the hose with everybody else, you have a chance. And by the way, NC State kind of did that. You notice how that NC State Purdue game, Edey finished with 20. Lance Jones finished with 14. Nobody else finished with more than 11. So I'll tell you this, if UConn holds everybody to under 14 points, not named Zach Edey, unless a bunch of them go off and get 10, 11, 12, then I think we're talking about a game that UConn wins. And so I could go on and on. But I believe that there is a blueprint to beat UConn, and I just don't know that Purdue can do it. I just think that from the Purdue perspective, a lot's going to be on Zach Edey's shoulders. A lot he can handle. But I'm not sure that he can handle taking on all of UConn if his guards don't show up ready to play. And so to me, ultimately, end of day, I like UConn. And it's not because I don't like Zach Edey, not because I don't like Purdue. I just don't know how those guards get buckets. I don't know how they get free. I don't know how they get open. I don't know how they hit shots. Remember, they're coming off a game where they shot pretty well against NC State, but NC State doesn't have the size of UConn. And so my prediction is UConn, they shut down those guards defensively. I think Zach Edey goes for easily 25. Maybe not easily, but I think they go for 25. I don't think anybody else gets anything besides him. Remember, Purdue only scored 63 points on Saturday night. And so I could go on, but let me give you my prediction. I think this game goes a lot like every other UConn game over the last 4 or 5 weeks. I think Purdue stays in it for a half. I think Purdue stays in it even maybe a little bit longer. But go back and look at all these UConn games. Round 1 of the Big East tournament, up by 1 at halftime, won by 30. Big East championship game, it was close at the half against Marquette. UConn wins by almost 20. Sweet 16 game, San Diego State, 9-point game at halftime. UConn wins by 30. Illinois, 5-point game at halftime. UConn wins by 25 plus. How about Saturday night? UConn up by 4 at halftime. They end up winning by what? 17, 16, whatever it ends up being. And so I could go on and on. I actually think this game is a runaway. Give me UConn. Let me make sure, because I had producer Matt actually make me a graphic, so I can't tell you what I don't have on the graphic. I will say UConn, in my opinion, this is my prediction. UConn 84, Purdue 68. I think it's close for a half. I don't think Purdue gets enough from everybody else to keep it close. I think UConn goes running away, winning a second straight national championship. And if they do, guess what? We got ourselves a story for the ages, and we're going to react to it all because the history that is, and by the way, if Purdue wins, we're still going to react to it. Don't get me wrong. But if UConn wins, we're talking about the history that is at stake. Back-to-back national championships, 6th in school history for UConn. There will be a lot to discuss, and we will discuss it all on Monday night, live from the Final Four.